Welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Assemblyman Mike Spano, representing the people of the city of Yonkers and certainly Westchester County. And I just wanted to say hello. It's an honor for me to be here and to have this opportunity to meet with constituents and local organizations on a daily basis to discuss ways to improve the quality of life for our residents of our city and our state. One local organization that continues to make a significant progress in improving the lives of so many people in our communities is the Westchester Disabled on the Move. Some people call you WDOM. And today I'm joined by Mel Tamsin, who is the Executive Director of the Westchester Disabled on the Move. And I just want to say welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Assemblyman. Thank you.
Well, for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, can you do me a favor and just tell us what is Westchester Disabled on the Move and what are some of the services and the programs that your organization offers our community?
Sure. Mike, Westchester Disabled on the Move is an independent living center, which is a non-residential advocacy center for people with disabilities. We help people get benefits they need, help them find housing, basically get what they need to live independently within the community. Most of our staff are people with disabilities, as well as our board of directors, so it's kind of a peer assistance organization. People are able to blend their professional knowledge along with their own personal knowledge about what it takes to be independent and get over the barriers that people with disabilities face in the community. So we have a number of different programs. Like I said, we assist people to get benefits, to understand how they can work and keep certain benefits. We work on getting kids in high school with disabilities to be able to get transitioned to the adult life, work, or further education. We do a lot of different things, but most importantly, I think the whole concept of independent living. 30, 40 years ago, people with disabilities, especially severe physical disabilities, were expected to live in institutional settings. We've made incredible progress since then, but there are still people who live in institutions and are trying to get out, and we provide a lot of assistance to help them get out.
Yes, you do, and I've been dealing with you for many, many years, and know certainly I have a very intimate knowledge of what's happening, how your organization operates, and the people that you service back at home. A not-for-profit clearly means you don't make any money. It means you run on a skeletal kind of staffing allotment. You maybe tell the viewers, how is your organization funded?
Primarily through the state education department. What used to be VESID, it just recently changed to Access. Don't expect me to remember exactly what Access stands for, but it's connected to vocational rehabilitation. The 38 centers for independent living in New York State, many of them get funds from the New York State Education Department, but we also get some funds through community development block grants from the city of Yonkers, United Way, we get some money, and we also do some fundraising independently. So, mostly state agencies, but also some local.
And we'll get back to the budget issue in a second. What I'd like to do is just real quick, just recently we recognized the 20th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Can you explain to the viewers the impact this law has had on people with disabilities and where disability rights still has to go?
We've come a long way in the last 20 years. Most government offices are now physically accessible. If a person with a disability, be they blind or deaf, or have a mobility impairment, are able to access the same services in most cases that the temporarily able-bodied population are able to access. One of the main things we've done in the last actually 5-6 years or so is to equalize access to voting for people with disabilities. There have been many different decisions, but we worked really actively in New York, in Westchester County, to make sure that the majority, if not all, of the polling places were physically accessible and people with disabilities could vote independently. For so many years, people with disabilities would vote absentee ballot, and unfortunately, sometimes absentee ballots don't have the same import as the regular voting on the machine, and we're really happy that people with disabilities can vote. So that's one of the many changes. More restaurants that people can eat at, more stores, more responsibilities on the part of businesses to provide access and reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities.
More residential opportunities.
But we have a long way to go, only because, people with disabilities, most of them unfortunately aren't fixed incomes. So they're also poor people, and in a county like Westchester County, where the cost of living is so high and the cost of housing is so high, unfortunately, we have a lot of people who really can't afford to maintain their homes independently. Many of them have to rely on Medicaid because they have home care services. They have to spend down to, $700 a month or so in income in order to get the Medicaid. So, there are some real barriers. There are attitudinal barriers as well, especially in the workplace, to people with disabilities becoming employees. But we have made a lot of progress. Like I said, 40 years ago, if you were a quadriplegic, which is somebody who has limited motion in their arms and their legs, you'd expect to spend your life in a nursing home. That's no longer true.
Now, this year was the first year we implemented HAVA, Help America Vote Act, and we put in place new machines all across New York State. There was some mixed reviews about how that all went. Overall, though, can you tell me how that went for people with disabilities?
I think that it went better than we thought, and it really varied around the state. I know that in Westchester County, we had a number of complaints of the accessible voting machines not operating correctly, or the people there didn't know how to find the key to open it. So there were those kind of, problems. However, a colleague of mine who lives in Dutchess County actually was able to work with the Board of Elections to really encourage not only the traditional people with disabilities to vote on the accessible machines, but the elderly people whose eyesight is going. They were able to really promote the use of it, and it was used a lot more by that population because of that promotion. It really depends on how it's viewed by the Board of Elections and how it's promoted by the Board of Elections. So, I mean, there were people who I know who, 5 years ago was the first time they were able to vote in any way but an absentee ballot. And that was important for them to be able to participate in the process.
Yeah, I know that the county has worked very, very hard over the last couple of years to make sure that at least the sites themselves have accessibility. Now, once you get to the machine is obviously another whole discussion. On my personal, what I think personally, I would have much rather had a DRE. I think that the machine, that it was a flat screen TV, and that if you had a different language, just hit a different button. If you had a disability, you could just hit a button, it'll expand it, reduce it. It also had a drape around it. I thought that was a much better choice than the optic scan, but that was not the winner of the day. The optic scan was the winner of the day, and that's what we're dealing with. That's what our law is.
I agree with you. I think that the DRE machines are more adaptable, more in tune with technology, but there's so much fear and paranoia about the security of the vote that it just wasn't meant to be at this point. But I agree with you, it would have been a lot better. But, it's still an improvement over doing an absentee ballot.
Yes. One of the most important issues that we face this year, obviously, will be the significant impact on people with disabilities in this whole Medicaid reform and redesign committee. The governor's Medicaid relief redesign team has been holding hearings all across New York State and has released a preliminary list of suggestions for quote unquote reducing the cost of the program. What possible reform measures do you see as having the greatest impact on people with disabilities?
I think that We've come into this process, the people with disabilities and their advocates, the independent living centers, for years now, 5, 6 years, suggesting to the state how reform, including moving people out of institutions when they don't want to be there, back into the community, utilizing cheaper services and services that are more acceptable to people with disabilities, would save money. We've written a proposal, which the governor has, as well as the redesign team, which over 5 years would save close to $1 billion. So we come in with our ideas. What our fear is that whenever they want to cut Medicaid, they look at the services that are growing fastest, and personal care, which is home care at home, that only really Medicaid pays for. Medicare, not going to pay for it for you in most cases. If you have the need for hands-on care every day, you have to rely on Medicaid. Often you have to spend down from your income down to about $780. And we're always worried because I've seen it. I've been around for 25 years doing this. So capping hours of home care, which would be discriminatory against people with the more severe disabilities, putting people into some form of managed care without giving them some power within that to work with the managed care provider. We really have come up with our own ideas and have offered them to the governor. We offered them to the previous governor. And you know, the package includes the idea of, like I said, getting people out of institutions who want to leave institutions. And if only 10% were able to get out of institutions, I think we'd save about $300 million, we estimate. We are also talking about utilizing something that's called consumer-directed personal care services, which allows people to choose their own attendants and manage them and hire them and fire them, which we have found to be administratively less expensive. I know that the governor has talked a lot about, 60 cents on the dollar goes to administrative costs. It's incredibly cheaper when with some of these consumer-directed personal assistance agencies, where probably good 90% of the fee goes to the direct care worker. So those are the kind of things, and there are, in healthcare reform, federal healthcare reform, lastly, there's also some opportunities to work with the feds to do new programs, new waiver programs, where the federal government would increase their share of the Medicaid payment. All of those things would save money.
Well, I think that's the key phrase this year. It seems to be, we have a $10 billion deficit. There is going to be some cost savings because there is no really other option. But what we want to make sure, and I think that our viewers need to know this, is that there are going to be areas of this budget, and certainly in the area of healthcare, that we have to be very careful that we're not taking the people who need the most services and kind of balancing the budget on their backs.
Exactly.
And I think but that only happens if we're quiet. And so this budget will move. There'll be some change in this budget. And I think overall we're going to see cuts. This budget will move, but it will only move if the advocates get up and speak loudly. So hopefully they'll do that. I know you will do that. That's why you're here.
Yes.
And I want to say, certainly, I just want to say thank you to the people of Yonkers in Westchester County for watching the show, and thank Mel for coming on.
My pleasure, Mike.
Good to see you.
Thank you.